Chapter 12, Rule 12. Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. I
Or a
don't have,
dog in your
right?
case, because he's right behind you.
I don't have a cat, but Clyde, he is literally sitting behind me on my chair today. And I was going to kick him off, but I was like, you know what? Jordan Peterson told us to pet a cat, and I can expand that to being nice to dogs. Welcome back, and happy Tuesday, turkeys. How long have we known each other?
We've known each other for 2 decades.
I am not apologizing for who I am or what I like or the people that I love.
How do I be a wife? How do I be a mom? And how do I be myself in all of that? You didn't see that coming, did you?
Good morning!
Good morning.
Man, all right. Well, I don't know if you had any initial thoughts before I read the summary, but I just wanted to say that after chapter 11 feeling really long and really intense, this felt like an easy breezy cover girl read.
I was going to say the same thing. This was probably the easiest chapter. I also am very familiar with his daughter's story, which we'll get into later. So it all kind of made sense and I already knew a lot of it, which helps me digest information. So I'm like a gotta read it 2 times type of person. So
Do you think it's harder to listen and absorb when it's like
yeah,
intensive information?
yeah. But I don't have time to read it usually on paper.
Yeah,
So
it's
I mean,
better
it's
than
better than
nothing.
nothing.
Yeah. I think my audio listening skills have gotten better because I consume so much audio, like podcasts and stuff, but I can definitely tell when something's still intense or if somebody tries to give me verbal instructions on how to do something or verbal directions. And if they include east and west, someone literally did this to me yesterday. And in my mind, I was like, Kaylee, you should pay attention because they probably know a better way to get there than your GPS does. But also, was I going to retain it? No. So I just listened to a little concert in my head while they talked. Okay, all right, let's read this summary. Okay. Life is hard. Some people seem to suffer more than others, and even the greatest thinkers in recent history were unable to explain why this happens. When faced with tragedy, we are still left with an option. We can curse life itself, we can succumb to the misery, or we can look for moments of beauty, humor, whimsy, and in those moments, we can find a sense of joy and relief. What does this have to do with cats? Well, Dr. Peterson uses stopping to pet a cat on the street as a way to remind ourselves that life is absurd and funny and sweet. We can continue to aim high even when tragedy brings us low. We can pet a cat if it chooses to grace us with its presence, or we can stop and smell a flower, or we can follow Andrew Huberman's advice and spend time each morning getting sunlight into our eyes. This chapter feels like the perfect way to end this book. Dr. Peterson shares some of his own struggles in life and the fragility of the family that we love. We are reminded that to be invincible would rob us of the true joys in life, the challenges that make us stronger, and the limitations make us who we are. Life will have its ups and downs. Set your sights on the next minute if the next day feels too far away, and leave a little bit of room for wonder.
I like that. That's a great way to put it.
And AirPods were on noise cancellation, and I was feeling like I was stuffed up, but it was just because my ears were
I hate that feeling, to be
soundproof
honest.
plugged. It's all right if there's somebody cackling or making obnoxious noises in a waiting room like I've experienced in the last couple of days, but yeah,
Valid.
it's not my general thing. Anyway, coming back.
I love the summary. I agree with you with this was one of my favorite chapters. I don't know why. Maybe it's because the end and maybe it's because it's short, maybe because it wasn't weighty, but I just liked his personal story combined with, the theme of the book is life is hard and there's always struggle and there's chaos and order, but it's how you choose to react to the chaos and the sadness and the struggle. Like, life is a struggle. I personally feel like this life on Earth is just not a test per se, but if we do reincarnate, like, this is a hard level. Like, there's a lot to learn here and there's a lot of struggle and we all have to deal with it. It's just how we react to it.
Right. I think it was interesting. He waited until the very end to share kind of a big piece of his own personal story. I also I don't know that much about him, and I did not know about his daughter's struggle with rheumatoid arthritis.
Mhm.
So it kind of, I don't know, it sort of feels like he made the whole book and he's talking about all these things through history and how life can be hard by Clyde. And then he goes on to kind of, at the very end, I guess not give you credibility, but in case anybody was like, well, what do you know about things that are hard? He didn't open with that, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, he kind of kept it to his chest, and which is smart. You don't want to come out the gate swinging, but also it's like, okay, we have this insight on your personal life, and you're not just this prestigious academic. Like, you have real life struggles like all of us that you're dealing with. But, well, I can jump in if you want. Okay, so a fun fact, and this relates to our life because I've always really liked Jordan Peterson. I've watched a lot of his YouTube videos, which set me down a rabbit hole into Michaela Peterson, which is his daughter, because she has a big podcast. She kind of blew up and went viral, and a lot of all of her health issues, like her rheumatoid arthritis, she's had a lot of different stuff, almost like chronic fatigue syndrome, like crippling depression. And she has these, I guess they're like trial videos with people in, I think it's Congress or somebody, about the food system, which is how I got entangled in all this.
That makes sense.
And she actually is the one that's known for her lion's diet, which is the far most pure form of the carnivore diet. Which is how I got sucked into researching carnivore diet and watching a million YouTube videos. So I've consumed a lot of her content as well, specifically about the carnivore diet. And her story is crazy. And the fact that food has changed her life is absolutely crazy. Obviously, he wrote this book a long time ago, so the update at the end was still feeling really kind of sad. Like, there was some hope at the end, but it's nice to know personally that now in 2025, she's like doing a really, really, really good, because she basically heals herself with food. So that's a little side tangent. Yeah. So that's how I got onto the whole carnivore kick, by the way.
That's so interesting. And then I got onto it by proxy.
Yeah. So.
Well, good. I loved, I guess my takeaway before I start reading quotes, I just really liked his acknowledgement of kind of the more you love someone, the more you're attached to people, the scarier it gets. Like the stakes go up. And he obviously talks about being a parent and things like that, but it's just one of those things you acknowledge. Maybe people don't acknowledge it early unless they've had some type of a loss, but it's just one of those things, like you're also kind of balancing that in life. And I don't know, it was a hopeful way of putting things, and I enjoyed that he mentioned, or the way he continued to highlight, that if you saved, quote unquote, saved the person you loved from any hardship, or if there was never any risk to them, or if life never ended, they would not be the same person anymore.
Right, which is super interesting. And I liked his, I don't want to steal your thunder if you're going to read this quote, but he basically talks about Superman and how he was so perfect and so powerful and not vulnerable at all that it made him boring. And then they started having to come up with things like kryptonite to make him more interesting and real.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, like if this life had no struggles, then we wouldn't be able to appreciate the times where things are really good and happy and the little moments,
Yeah. All right. Let's go. I don't think I had like super highlights in this because the whole thing was good. It wasn't as punchy, I don't think, maybe. I almost just feel like if you should just go read this chapter if you're not going to be able to read the whole book.
I literally am going to ask Kenny, like, just read this one chapter. Start here. Because
Yeah.
I've been trying to get him to, this is a big one. But I literally was having that thought. I was like, he should just read this last chapter and see what happens.
Just start from the end. Okay. The idea that suffering is a tenet in one form or another of every major religious doctrine. Oops, it is a tenet. That's what he's saying. As we've already discussed. Buddhists state it directly. Christians illustrate it with the cross. Jews commemorate the suffering endured over centuries. Such reasoning universally characterizes the great creeds because human beings are intrinsically fragile. We can be damaged, even broken, emotionally and physically, and we are all subject to the depredations of aging and loss. This is a dismal set of facts, and it is reasonable to wonder how we can expect to thrive and be happy, or even want to exist sometimes under such conditions. He just did a good job of summarizing that.
No, I love that.
I mean, some people, I guess, when they're going through happy times in life, maybe they're not acknowledging it. But it goes back to that whole, what is that? That memento mori sort of thought process. What is it? Memento mori, memento vivere? Anyway, it's the Latin. Like in this moment, you could die, in the next moment, like in this moment you're living, the next moment you could die. That whole life is finite and fragile and all of those kinds of things. I really think that grasping that makes it so much sweeter in the moments.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people do not want to acknowledge that. And I get that, I don't know, I guess it does sound kind of morbid, but that concept feels like a major topic and with a lot of law enforcement people or people in the military, just people that are dealing with life and death on a day-to-day basis. I imagine even like EMS people, because they're showing up on scene to gnarly stuff sometimes. I don't know, I just liked how he worded it, because it is like hard and tragic, and watching people age is really hard, and recognizing that it's this weird thing where you're lucky if you live a long time, but then the longer you live and the more you age, kind of the harder that things are.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me happy every morning I wake up and my legs work and I can go do stuff.
Yeah. I always think I have to remind myself, like, this moment won't last, which could be twofold. It's like, if this is a happy moment, like, be present, take it all in and appreciate it. And if it's a bad moment, just know that it won't last and you'll get through it, type of thing.
Yeah. Is true. Okay. I had realized something relevant to this years before about 3-year-old Julian, that's his son. I thought, I love my son. He's 3 and cute and little and comical, but I am also afraid for him because he could be hurt. If I had the power to change that, what might I do? I thought he could be 20 feet tall instead of 40 inches. Nobody could push him over then. He could be made of titanium instead of flesh and bone. Then if some brat bounced a toy truck off his noggin, he wouldn't care. He could have a computer-enhanced brain, and even if he was damaged, somehow his parts could be immediately replaced. Problem solved. But no, not problem solved. And not just because such things are currently impossible. Artificially fortifying Julian would have been the same as destroying him. Instead of his little 3-year-old self, he would be a cold, steel-hard robot. That wouldn't be Julian, it would be a monster. I came to realize through such thoughts that what can be truly loved about a person is inseparable from their limitations. Julian wouldn't have been little and cute and lovable if he wasn't also prone to illness and loss and pain and anxiety. Since I loved him a lot, I decided that he was alright the way he was, despite his fragility.
Yeah. If Caden could well, whatever. If my son could walk around with bubble wrap all around him, that'd make me feel better. But also at the same time, that would be weird. And then he wouldn't know how to handle adversity when it comes up. So
Yeah.
it goes back to not being a helicopter parent too. It's like, or a helicopter anything. You just gotta like, crap. Things are gonna happen to the people that I love, and I can't necessarily stop it from happening, but I can be there to support them.
Yeah. Also, just for people watching, the shadow and the way that it's hitting my face is really driving me nuts. And I don't know if I have a way to remedy it. So I might just have a weird shadow on my face because it's a different time of day than we normally record. Whatever. Okay. Next. If you are already everything, everywhere, always, there was nowhere to go and nothing to be. Everything that could be already is, and everything that could happen already has. And it is for that reason, so the story goes, that God created man. No limitation, no story. No story, no being. That idea has helped me with the terrible fragility of being. It helped my client too. I don't want to overstate the significance of this. I don't want to claim that this somehow makes it all okay. She still faced the cancer afflicting her husband just as I still faced my daughter's terrible illness, but there's something to be said for recognizing that existence and limitation are inextricably linked.
Mm. Mm.
I very much liked the no limitation, no story.
Yeah.
Because it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then how he also is just like, listen, folks, I'm not saying this is just like, oh, now we know this, everything's dandy. He's like, nah, it's still fucking awful. You have to, but acknowledging that somehow does give suffering meaning, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't really have a lot more. Okay, this is going to be a daddy long leg, so just bear with me, okay? Oh, this was just really good advice. Set aside some time to talk and to think about the illness or other crisis and how it should be managed every day. Do not talk or think about it otherwise. If you do not limit its effect, you'll become exhausted and everything will spiral into the ground. This is not helpful. Conserve your strength. You're in a war, not a battle, and a war is composed of many battles. You must stay functional through all of them. When worries associated with the crisis arise at other times, remind yourself that you will think them through during the scheduled period. This usually works. The parts of your brain that generate anxiety are more interested in the fact that there is a plan than in the details of the plan. Don't schedule your time to think in the evening or at night, then you won't be able to sleep. If you can't sleep, then everything will rapidly go downhill. I should have put this on the front end. This is his piece of advice. Like, if you're going through something particularly difficult, is kind of how he prefaced it, which I thought was such good advice. You just start like, okay, we can talk about this and think about this at this time in the morning. And then other than that, we have to bring our thoughts back to something else.
Mm-hmm.
I also liked this part. Shift the units of time you use to frame your life. When the sun is shining and times are good and the crops are bountiful, you can make your plans for next month and next year and the next 5 years. You can even dream a decade ahead, but you can't do that when your leg is clamped firmly in a crocodile's jaw. Sufficient unto the days are the evils thereof. That is Matthew 6:34. It is often interpreted as live in the present without a care for tomorrow. This is not what it means. That injunction must be interpreted in the context of the Sermon on the Mount, which is an integral part. That sermon distills the 10 thou shalt nots of the commandments of Moses into a single perspective, thou shalt. Christ enjoins his followers to place faith in God's heavenly kingdom and the truth. That's a conscious decision to presume the primary goodness of being. That's an act of courage. Aim high like Pinocchio's Geppetto. Wish upon a star and then act appropriately in accordance with that aim. Once you are aligned with the heavens, you can concentrate on the day. Be careful. Put the things you can control in order, repair what is in disorder, and make what is good already better. Make what is already good better. It is possible that you can manage if you are careful. People are very tough. People can survive through much pain and loss, but to persevere, they must see the good in being. If they lose that, they are truly lost.
I like that. I like that part, especially the first part when he's talking about pick a time. Like, you can talk about it, but pick a time, not at night. You can't dwell on it all day. And it's one time to process or plan or figure something out regarding this problem or situation. And I like that because I just lost my train of thought. It's like, it's not identical, but it reminds me of when toddlers have meltdowns. They're in this heated moment. Now their frontal cortex is not developed and they can't actually reason or have any logic in that moment. But it kind of is the same with adults. Like, if you're that emotional in the moment, that wouldn't be a good teaching opportunity. Like, you wait until they're settled and at a good place, and then you talk about what happened or try to tell them, like, okay, we don't hit or we don't do whatever you just did. So it's a little different, but it's like you can't do it in the depths of the deep struggle moments. Do it in the daylight when you're okay.
I really liked the part about the time that you can see ahead. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and they talk about this in AA, which I think is kind of what made me think about it. But if you can't handle the thought of how am I going to be so sober forever, then maybe think about how can I be sober for this week. And if a week is too much, then think about a day. And if a day is too much, then just think about the next breath. Like,
Yeah.
You can chop life down into very small bite-sized pieces if the big picture seems like too much. And I thought he did a good job of kind of illustrating that when times are going well, it is easy because we're not in fight or flight. We're not focused on survival.
Right.
We can plan ahead, and that's a great time to do that. And it's okay if your vision narrows and if your focus kind of hones in on just the present or the next day or just what we need to do minute by minute to keep moving in the middle of something that's hard.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, well, this is my last quote because this, like we said, this was a shorty boy chapter. If you pay careful attention, even on a bad day, you may be fortunate enough to be confronted with small opportunities of just that sort. And he's talking about like having a nice break or just like a tiny little respite in your day. Okay, maybe you will see a little girl dancing on the street because she is all dressed up in a ballet costume. Maybe you will have a particularly good cup of coffee in a cafe that cares about their customers. Maybe you can steal 10 or 20 minutes to do some ridiculous little thing that distracts you or reminds you that you can laugh at the absurdity of existence. Personally, I like to watch The Simpsons episode at 1.5 times regular speed. All the laughs 2/3 the time.
I
And
like that.
maybe when you are going for a walk and your head is spinning, a cat will show up, and if you pay attention to it, then you will get a reminder for just 15 seconds that the wonder of being might make up for the I don't know. Ineradicable suffering that accompanies it. Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street.
I love it. I love
He
it.
also ends the chapter saying things are good for now, which is so ominous. But it's also true. Like when things are good, then you enjoy them and you recognize that you're not guaranteed to have them forever, and then you don't cling on to them like a death grip. I think
Yes.
that has been a good lesson for me that I've been working on is I'm very comfortable talking about death and life being finite and suffering, but it's also balancing that out with not obsessing over I have to hold on to this moment because you like choke the life out of it if you're strangling shit. So it's sort of relaxing into whatever the present has, knowing that things are going to ebb and things are going to flow and I don't have control of it anyway. And if I sit here and try to just like strangle the shit out of it, this pleasant moment, it becomes less pleasant. So you don't like get super high when the highs are high, and you won't get super low when the lows are low. You just sort of take things as they come and appreciate them for what they are.
Yeah. And I think with, obviously if someone's listening and or just someone out there is like really struggling, like chronic disease or something that's a lot harder to forget. Because, right now in our life, we have hard moments and then we have great moments, but there's people out there that it feels like that is life. And that's what I love about just the one thing I wrote down that I could remember was basically the same thing as what you just said. But if you are suffering and you notice a cat on the street, you might stop and pet it for a moment. The moment might just remind you that life isn't just suffering. So it's like, if you're really, really in it and it feels like it's just not worth it and it's just this is too hard, it's too much, why me, just bad all the time. But if you can find even 15 seconds, it's like, yeah, that's life is really hard, but it's not all struggle. Like there's things to appreciate, be grateful for, and that's easier to say when you're not in it. But if you are in it, I think that's his point he's trying to make. And I really like this chapter is what I'm trying to say.
Me too. I really liked the acknowledgement that there are these silly little moments that we can grab onto and we have to look. If you look for them, you'll find them.
Right.
Even in the midst of the poopiest of times. The poopiest and the schloopiest of times.
So that's it. That was chapter 12.
It's kind of crazy.
But he's got a little, what's it called? Prologue at the end? What's it called?
Yeah, he put coda.
Yeah, what does that mean?
I know that it's a symbol in music.
Mm-hmm.
When you're wrapping up sheet music or something. It's gotta mean ending. It's gotta be Latin.
I'm gonna look it up real quick. ChatGPT. Coda is the concluding section. Obviously. Does it stand for something?
I want to know what the etymology is.
Okay, we'll look it up and let everyone know next week when we talk about it.
Yes, anyhow, we'll be wrapping up next week with the end, final thoughts, last looks. I mean, really our tip this week is just if you're not ready to consume the whole book, just start with chapter 12 because it was such a good distillation of everything in the whole book.
I agree. And also my little tip of the week is I'm not a dietitian nor a doctor, so this is opinion only, but if you are interested, you should just look up Michaela Peterson and her Lions diet and just read her story because it's really fascinating how food has completely changed her life.
I'm gonna have to just go look it up. I didn't even know.
Love you, bye.
Bye.
Ooh, it's Italian for tail.
God damn it, I knew there was something.